the Weekly Wrap, ending Friday, September 11th, 2020. This week we're saying, well, that's a wrap of the Weekly Wrap, the podcast, at least for now. And we're also wondering, how can we stop things as easily as we start them? And yeah, a little bit about what's wrapping up to be a new wrap about the wrap of the week. So let's wrap up this whole thing, shall we? Our theme this week, stopping. Something I'm thinking a lot about these days is that most of the challenge of success is not following the right path. You follow the right path until it ends. Most of life's challenge is deciding on the new right path. The interesting parts of life are the intersections. That's why looking both ways is good. And this is the Weekly Wrap. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final episode of the Weekly Wrap, our weekly play on words that play in the world this week. Yeah, that's right. The Weekly Wrap as a podcast is morphing into something different, something new, something, well, stopped and started. And we'd like you to help build this new thing. As this podcast goes on hold, we'll transition a Weekly Wrap blog post featuring some great examples of content marketing at play in the world. And that's where you come in. Spot something worth sharing, great or really bad, because let's be honest, that's fun too. Blog post or an engaging social media post or a podcast or a tool, or it could be poorly done too, because again, of course, good entertainment, whether it's a video, a social media story, whatever it is, some content marketing news that your peers need to see. If it moves you, well, move it on over to us. Hashtag us up at #WeeklyWrap on social media, or quite frankly, fill out the form that we'll post in the show notes this week. Now, every Friday, you can read the most entertaining of these in the Weekly Wrap post at ContentMarketingInstitute.com. Now, will a blog post be a Weekly Wrap's final form? Well, you can follow along and see where it goes next. And while my thoughts won't be here on video or audio each week, you can hopefully still read them in CMI's weekly newsletter. It comes out every Friday, so make sure you're subscribed there as well. So, as I tie up my last thought on this podcast episode, I thought I'd, tie in a bit of two thoughts. It was a tie, whether I should tie it up by tying something together about the rising tide of commentary about being tidy with our content, or when to untie yourself from the content platform that you're currently tied down to. The latter makes you want to tie one on, and before you're fit to be tied, let's tie up the tide of the thoughts into a bow tie of content. As always, I'm your host, Robert Rose, Chief Strategy Advisor for the Content Marketing Institute. Well, it's time to get this week's show underway. Is it for you to stop? One of the more interesting challenges that we have as content marketers is that unlike campaigns, the platforms we build to attract audiences, they have to be built up over time. We often talk about how content marketing resembles product marketing even more than it does traditional campaign-focused marketing and advertising. And the challenge comes from the fact that the inherent failure rate from any of our content marketing initiatives is likely to be pretty high. But because they're designed, budgeted, and resourced for the long run, making the decision to stop them is usually pretty dramatic, fairly painful, and sometimes even very political process. I was speaking with a VP of marketing recently at a large technology company, and for the last 8 years, their blog had been relatively successful. They'd built a sizable audience and had gotten a bit of business value out of it. But in the last 2 years, growth stagnated. they'd lost quite a number of subscribers and the SEO value had largely disappeared. They made what the VP of marketing told me was the very difficult decision to take it down. Now, the absence of a blog is not going to challenge the company much, but it was what happened next. In the place of the blog, the team decided to look at launching a new digital magazine, and they planned it and they budgeted it and they got it launched. And over the 6 months that it was around, well, it didn't really get any traction at all. And while that effort was going on, well, another group launched a podcast and that fell flat on its face. So a year into 2 poorly performing platforms, and the VP of marketing wondered, are we just too late now to start anything new in our space? Well, spoiler alert, no, they're not too late. If we're going to operate more like media companies, one of the things that we have to adopt is the way that media companies look at both the development and cancellation of content products. They understand 2 important keys about launching and managing these products. The first is, it's exceedingly difficult to know what will be successful with audiences. And the second is that you have to be willing and able to stop something as easily as it was to start it. Consider for a moment that in 2020, admittedly pre-COVID atmosphere, the majority of television networks were planning on anywhere between 12 and 20 pilots for the new television season. Now, typically, a pilot, when they make one, the network will invest meaningfully in an A-level talent and millions in production, and they'll produce at least 1 episode, if not more, of a show. The goal is to test it, actually see if the concept works, or if audiences will respond positively or negatively to it. And needless to say, only about 20% of those pilots ever see a public airing. And of course, the competition for engaging audiences of this content has never been thicker. According to some reports, there are more than 500 scripted television series in the United States in 2019. Of these, the expectation is about approximately 150 of them will be canceled in any given year. Another 50 might be considered, let's call it, minimally viable for a longer run, and the rest will be in what we might call the messy middle, that whole chunk of, sort of, will it get canceled next year? Is it going to happen? What's going to go on with that show? That's a whole lot of churn for new product every single year. And the key point is that no one knows which, if any of them, will turn out to be winners. This is the critical reason, however, that media companies have built an approach to develop as much product as they do. They aren't just investing millions of dollars to throw the proverbial spaghetti against the wall. They understand that tomorrow's mega hit may come from the most surprising of origins. The key is to do the research, do the deep dive, the creative talent, bring together a diverse approach, and actually take the time to develop a portfolio that they can test. This is the exact opposite of how most businesses develop content marketing properties. Today, most businesses will strategize and then winnow down the opportunities based on a budget, and then invest in a story or format that existing or maybe newly approved resources can support. The equivalent would be like, let's say, a media company said, let's make a new TV show, but then they figure out how much of the budget a whole season's going to take up. And then to maximize that budget, they go with whatever talent is still available and employable. And then they figure out what kind of show their cameras and technology can allow them to shoot. And with all of those limitations aligned, then they figure out what story they should tell. And then they go all in on that approach. That's not going to produce the opportunities for many hits. As product and service brands, in order to compete in this noisy marketplace of ideas, we need to change the way that we approach both the development and decommissioning of our content products. To be clear, it's not just about creating more content. Very few companies have the resources or the checkbook, quite frankly, to just throw more at creating content or developing 24 blog platforms. But we should think about our infrastructure of resources, of technology, and the approach that allows us to build faster prototypes, platforms, and new content products. Building today's modern marketing content products is just different from building infrastructure like our corporate website. It has to be as fast as placing a media buy is these days because it may go just as quickly. For example, we can ask ourselves, do we really need to implement our new blog or resource center into the enterprise CMS system before we launch a prototype to test it? Can we redirect our creative talent to something cool and innovative instead of just producing more infographics for sales? Let's build a production studio approach that enables us to test stories, formats, audience engagement, like any media company would. Then, no matter when or how a content product performs in a marketplace, well, we need the same approach to decommissioning that project as media companies do. Yeah, canceling something that lasted a decade can be emotionally draining, politically sensitive, and quite frankly, a nostalgic experience. But keeping that failing blog going just because there's a team assigned to it is the fastest way to never develop a new platform again. Let's reassign talent, reuse storylines, repackage existing content, figure out how to launch new content ideas. It's no one's fault that the story, the platform, the format didn't resonate with an audience. You have no idea what's going to hit. As one of my heroes, Captain Jean-Luc Picard, once said, "You can commit no mistakes and still lose." That is not weakness. That is life. And that's absolutely life in content. Now, instead of reminding you to leave a comment or to review or any of that, I'll just remind you that we're stopping this, but wait, we'll start something new. But for now, as Simple Minds said, don't you forget about me. I'll be alone, dancing. You know it, baby. I'll put us together at heart. Will you call my name as you walk on by? Remember, everybody, it's your story to tell. Go tell it well. I'll see you soon.